Sir, good morning.
Good morning.
Is there any representative of the Republic of
The People's Republic.
People's Republic of China here? There isn't, sir, although they were invited.
No response.
Our first witness is Professor Wendy Rogers.
We just wait for 1 second for Mr. Vetch to return. I understand that Andrew Koo is delayed. We will start because time is pressing, and we will bring him up to date with the evidence when he arrives. Yes, Mr. Sabi.
Good morning, Professor Rogers. My name is Hamid Sabi.
And Professor Rogers,
Good morning.
as chairman of the tribunal, I thank you for making yourself available to give evidence, and you will understand that we want from you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
I do.
Professor Rogers, are you the chairman of the Coalition to End the Abuse of Transplant in China?
I'm the chairman of the International Advisory Committee of the International Coalition to End Transplant Abuse in China.
And currently you're the professor of clinic ethics, Department of Philosophy and Department of Clinical Medicine in Maguire University.
That's correct.
Professor Rogers, you have submitted a paper to the tribunal regarding the matters reviewed by the tribunal, in particular the ethics of the transplantation. Can you please tell briefly the tribunal the contents of your paper?
Mr. Sabi, before Professor Rogers does that, it may be that and it may even be that members of the tribunal will have little to ask of this witness. Therefore, we will be content if she explains her conclusions reasonably fully.
Thank you. Professor Rogers, please.
Certainly. My evidence is based on my own research, which is largely paper-based from Sydney, Australia. I have not travelled to China in recent years, and I have never travelled to China to speak with people about organ transplantation. And that's the nature of my evidence concerns two main points. The first is that I have found a lack of compliance with ethical standards in published research concerning recipients of transplanted organs in the People's Republic of China. And the second piece of evidence, of which I have direct personal experience, is that there is, to my mind, a concerning lack of attentiveness and concern about allegations of forced organ harvesting from leading members of the transplant community, both in Australia and internationally. I'll just speak briefly to both of those 2 points. The first is that the lack of compliance with ethical standards in organ in China is based on a project that I led with a group of 6 other researchers. And what we were trying to do is to find out whether research concerning recipients of transplanted organs in China conformed to the ethical standards that are promulgated by bodies such as the International Transplant Society, the WHO, the World Medical Association, and so forth. And those bodies together have put out various documents and statements which result in 3 widely accepted standards concerning data obtained from people who have received transplants. The first is that research should not involve any biological material sourced from executed prisoners. The second is that research involving patients who receive transplants should be approved by a research ethics committee or institutional review board. And the third is that any research involving transplants should only proceed if there has been consent from the donors to do the transplants in the first place before the research takes place. These standards became explicit in 2006, which was after the People's Republic of China formally admitted that all of their organs were procured from executed prisoners. The Transplant Society at that time put out a statement saying very clearly that they would not accept any papers at their conference that involved data from organs procured from executed prisoners, and their journal and other leading journals also implemented written policy to say they would not publish such articles. And so that's what I was testing to see whether there was these standards were maintained or whether there was a gap between the apparent rhetoric of these leading bodies and what actually happened in practice. And in short, over a 12-month period with my volunteer team of researchers, used something called scoping methodology, which is just a way of searching for papers in the literature in a comprehensive way. And we identified 445 relevant papers, that is papers that reported on research in which the research participated in organ transplants. And the organs involved were livers, lungs and hearts. We were not able to include recipients of kidney transplants because there was a lack of information in the papers as to whether the donors of the kidneys were deceased or living, and we didn't want to muddy the waters by potentially donor organs, whereas hearts, lungs and livers in China came almost 100% from deceased donors. So with these papers, the 445 papers that we had identified, we then looked to see which of them stated explicitly that no organs from executed prisoners were used in the research, which was one of the standards that the Transplant Society had stated. So our conclusion was that this research shows the majority of the published literature reporting research on transplants in China between January 2000 and April 2017 fails to comply with ethical standards regarding exclusion of research based on data from organs procured from prisoners. And this is concerning in itself, but what to us was more concerning as authors of this research is that it shows that the reviewers, who are people involved in transplantation practice and in research, and the journal editors seemed indifferent to this lack of compliance with ethical standards. They didn't question why are we publishing this when there was no other transplant source apart from executed prisoners. You know, we shouldn't be publishing this material. There seemed to be no questioning of that. We really felt that the international community has little inclination to make even perhaps the most basic scrutiny or inquiries into the sources of organs reported in Chinese transplant research. That's a broad generalisation. There are a lot of journals involved, international journals. I don't know how many papers were rejected. It could be that some of the journals rejected 80% of the papers because it didn't state, and these ones slipped through the net. But as a picture, it seems to us quite worrying that so much of that research, over 90% of the research, failed to even mention where the organs came from when it was publicly known from the mid-2000s that all of the organs in China up until 2010 and the majority until 2015 at least came from executed prisoners. Shall I go on to my second, the point I want to make, or would anyone like to ask any questions now?
I think probably get to the end and we'll ask questions comprehensively.
Yes, it's if you
Certainly.
would like to continue, Professor Rogers, the questions will come at the end.
Yeah. Thank you. The second observation I want to make is that I have found in my own personal experience that members of the transplant community do not seem to want to engage with the research that's being done into allegations about forced organ harvesting in China. And they actually seem quite ignorant of that, whilst at the same time proclaiming that the whole system is ethical now in China, and that rumours, there were only ever rumours about forced organ harvesting. And Instead, they have an attitude of dismissal and repetition of official denials that sound very similar to the kinds of official denials that are made by Chinese spokespersons. So I have a couple of pieces of evidence in support of this view. Though some genuine humanitarians have an honest belief that the Chinese are persecuting innocent people by killing them for their organs, the stories are without substance. Those who travel to China and visit the wards of transplant units looking for this activity have not found it. And I was fairly astonished at this response, because it seemed to me, in a country as big as China, where there have been on the record up to 600 hospitals doing transplants, it would be impossible to say it's not going on just because you visited one hospital and hadn't seen it. Indeed, some of the hospitals are so big that you could be on the 17th floor and you wouldn't know where the organs were coming from that were being transplanted on the 3rd floor. So, it didn't seem a very, it seemed quite a dismissive reply to what on my part was a very genuine inquiry to try and understand what was going on and why there were these allegations of forced organ harvesting. It seemed to be dismissing it in a fairly cursory way. And in fact, since then, which was in November 2015, Professor Chapman's rhetoric appears to have become more dismissive. And this is evident in his comments, which are on the public record, to an inquiry made by the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade by the Australian Senate. And in that statement, he says that the figure which has been by the authors Kilgore, Matus and Gutman in their update report published in 2016, they estimate that there have been 60 to 100,000 transplants per year. And Professor Chapman says that those figures are a concoction. And that seems, again, a very disrespectful term to use when you look at the methodology in the update and see that they have tried to triangulate the data based on multiple data sources, each of which has got wide margins for errors, but all of which point to a much greater volume of transplant activity than what is admitted by the Chinese, which is in the order of 10,000 transplants a year.
Thank you, Professor Rogers. I have one question. You do mention that the 445 papers that you reviewed relate to 85,000 transplants.
I'm only hearing Chinese voice at the moment.
Sorry, the voice. Can you repeat that, please, because we didn't hear it? Can you hear me, Professor Rogers?
Is someone in? Should I be here?
Sorry, you cannot hear?
I can hear now, but there was a long period of someone speaking in a foreign language.
Sorry for that, but Professor Rogers, you mentioned that 445 papers that you reviewed relate to 85,000 transplants.
That is correct.
Do you have the data available now, or if not, can you later provide the tribunal as to the
Your
number?
Your sound has dropped out again.
The sound is out again. Can you?
The sound is.
Are we back? Is this better, Professor Rogers?
I couldn't hear you just then. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. No, it doesn't seem to be working.
we'll leave it as...
Now I can hear.
Now you can hear, okay. Professor Rogers,
Yes, now I can.
my question relates to the numbers. The 445 papers relate to 85,000 transplants. Can you
Yes.
transport those figures to items 1, 2, and 3 that you have mentioned? For instance, how many transplants are covered by the 6 papers that reported organ donors' consent? If you don't have it now, can you provide the tribunal with these figures later?
I can. I can provide it later. I don't have it in front of me.
Thank you. Now you will receive questions from the tribunal. Just for the information of the tribunal, both Professor Chapman and Professor O'Connor were invited to come to this hearing and respond to these suggestions. Both of them excused themselves for not being available. Reminders were sent, and they were invited even to submit after these hearings any comment they would like to make in respect of these issues. Thank you.
Professor Rogers, I don't think you've given, for the record, save in your curriculum vitae attached to your report, your professional qualifications. Just a couple of them, please, so that we can have a picture of who you are.
Yes, I'm a Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery. So for medical, which is a basic medical degree. I've got a diploma in obstetrics and gynecology. I'm a member of the UK Royal College of General Practitioners and a fellow of the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. And I also have a Bachelor of Honours in Philosophy and a PhD in Medical Ethics.
Your interest in this subject was first stimulated how?
I was appointed as a member of the Australian Health Ethics Committee, which is the peak body in Australia for creating ethical guidance. And in my capacity as a member of that committee, I went on to a working group which wrote the ethical guidelines for organ donation in Australia for practitioners and for members of the public to understand. And we had 2 sets of guidelines, one for living donations and one for deceased donations. And I took a leading role in the writing and drafting of those. Subsequently, I was on a national committee developing policy on donations after circulatory death, which was an emerging practice in Australia at the time, and was on the committee of the National Organ Donation Body that developed these guidelines, and then worked with sort of an educational outreach program with them, with practitioners around the country, explaining the finer details of the donation after circulatory death.
Thank you very much. You told us of the percentage of papers that you reviewed that referred to there being no organs from executed prisoners, a topic that, an observation you were unable to accept on the basis of research. Were any of those authors written to for further particulars?
No, they weren't. That was outside the scope of our research project, which stretched our team to capacity. But what we are hoping is that when the journal is published, and I checked the proofs this morning, so I'm hoping it will be out by the end of this week, that we've identified all of those papers, and we are hoping that people will then take it upon themselves to try and track down by contacting the authors, contacting the journals and so on. We see the paper as a resource that we've created, and we hope that other scholars will act on our findings.
And presumably your answer applies to the other 2 categories, the 73% and the 1%. And in cases of all 3, it would be open not just for them to choose to respond, but for investigators to approach them directly.
It would be that identify papers and the author details and so forth. Absolutely.
Thank you. That is something that we may further consider, I dare say. But you're not aware of anybody else who's going to be doing it in a methodological way. So if it's to be done, it would have to be done by the tribunal itself.
At the moment, yeah. And my own experience, I've had experience with one retraction, working with one individual paper, and that actually led to a retraction of a paper published in Liver International in which the authors falsely claimed that all of the transplanted organs were procured from volunteers when that was not possible. But it was a long process and took a lot of time and effort. And so that's why we decided to approach this issue in a broad brushstroke to identify all the potentially problematic papers and then hope that other people will take up some of the work rather than just starting off one at a time, picking them off.
And that extended process of retraction, did it come for you with any express acknowledgement or implication or material from which any inference could be drawn as to where the source of the organs was?
No. The Chinese authors, I don't have their letters in front of me verbatim, but in the end, the senior author claimed that it was a junior person who had made a mistake of some sort.
So in papers coming... Sorry, I beg your pardon, Professor. Say again?
This was after two rounds of letters. So the first response was very kind of dismissive of our claims and made further claims. There was no official answer from the authors back to the journal, but it was reported in the media that Huang Zhefu, who is the senior transplant official in China, had spoken with the senior author and been told that it was all due to a mistake by a junior member of staff.
So apart from...
But the authors...
Sorry, carry on.
But the authors did not write this particular excuse back to the journal itself. I haven't seen that in writing and can't verify that. You know, that's hearsay from what was in the media.
So apart from the 1% who reported that six papers reporting consent of organ donors, there is, in all these papers, no identification of where the organs come from.
Almost no identification, that's right, in the vast majority of papers.
You suggest, really, that there is an avoidance of recognition of norms and maybe an avoidance of the general conception of moral responsibility in those in the transplant community. These are mostly, they're all doctors and associated professionals. How do you explain such a blindsiding of professional people?
As I find it hard to explain, and I don't have any evidence or insights that people have given to me personally. I have come to my own views, I suppose, as to why this might be happening. The first is that there's an Australian connection in that Huang Zhefu undertook some of his transplant surgery training in Sydney many years ago, and he's of the same sort of cohort as Jeremy Chapman in particular, and they seem to be on friendly terms. They would have worked together as colleagues, and I suspect it's very easy to take the word of your friend and colleague over allegations that come from people that you perceive as hostile or destructive or having malign intent, which is how these allegations are portrayed if they come from practitioners of Falun Gong, and if they come from other people, they're portrayed as well-meaning but misguided humanitarians. So on the one hand, you've got people you don't know and perhaps have no reason to trust. On the other hand, you work with. I think it's a natural human tendency to believe the person that you worked closely with. And in particular, you are then, it looks like my screen's frozen.
Don't worry about that. We can hear you. Press on.
Okay. And in that situation, you were more inclined to believe the person that you know and have worked with and relied on, perhaps in work situations, and also given that close connection, there must feel like there's an opportunity to really role in transforming China, which has been the rhetoric from the Transplant Society for a dozen years or more, that China needs encouraging, helping to turn around, and this ban on accepting research using organs from transplanted prisoners was the stick, if you like. This is what the Chinese would be punished with if they didn't change, and the carrot was if they changed, they would be accepted into the international. But where I stand, it seems they have been accepted into the international community. They've been embraced with open arms, particularly at the last two International Transplant Society meetings. But the stick's just been left by the wayside. There hasn't been enforcement of the ethical standards. There has been a blind eye turned towards this kind of research. Well, I know Jeremy Chapman has said to me personally that he went through every single paper at the Hong Kong conference to ensure that there weren't any papers including data from executed prisoners. But that's just like that, and I have no reason to disbelieve him there, but that's just sort of one very visible effort against this whole sort of sea of unethical research coming into the literature. And it's much more powerful to have a paper published in a journal than to present it at a conference, because once it's published in the journal, it's part of the public record, it gets cited, and some of those papers that we've identified are widely cited. So that research that's founded perhaps on, extraordinarily horrendous procurement of organs is now, forming the basis for other research, and it's just sort of spreading. The ripples are going around the world.
Last question from me, because I know my colleagues want to ask you some questions as well. Using the word political with a small p, is some of the response of those to whom you've spoken political in the sense that they may be accepting some change in China will lead to further change, and it's better to put the past behind us rather than to explore it?
I do think that is quite possibly what's going on some of the time, that yes, what they did was bad, but, it's a new leaf now, we're moving forward. But I have to say I find that problematic on two counts because they haven't really got to the bottom of, the depths of the badness, and there's no accounting or justice in that approach. And second, why would you think the system has been able to change almost overnight? Seems very implausible.
Thank you. Professor Elliott.
Professor Rogers, the observations you make are in your evidence and just now are very much related to what's gone on in Australia. What is, from your knowledge, is the attitude of the rest of the world to this, or when you include the Transplant Society, does that reflect the observations of others in other countries and continents?
It seems to me to vary a great deal, and certainly Australia is not homogeneous either. For example, in Canada, it seems there is a significant cohort of transplant professionals who are concerned about this issue and will go to, such as declining to take part in research agreements with Chinese universities that their own institutions are pushing them to take part in. So I think in China there seems to be a lot more awareness. I know in the UK there's been some outspoken doctors, particularly about the Real Bodies exhibition in Birmingham recently, and another doctor at Birmingham who's been very actively speaking out about this. In Israel, of course, Dr. Jacob Levy, once he became aware of what was happening in China, that there were heart transplants on demand, was very active in leading Israel in passing legislation to prevent Israeli insurance companies reimbursing Israeli patients who went to China. So certainly, I think that's what makes me think the personal connection has been so strong. Australia, particularly Sydney, does seem to be a bit of an outlier. I was invited to give a talk in Brisbane recently on forced organ harvesting in China, and was astonished that they were standing room only in the venue, and the audience was extremely interested and asked very engaged questions. So it does seem a bit unusual, but to me, part of the tragedy of it is that the Australians, Phil O'Connell and Jeremy Chapman, have each in recent times been president of the Transplant Society, so they've had a lot of influence, even though even though they come from Sydney and clearly don't reflect necessarily the views of all of the Australian transplant community, never mind the international one yet. They've been leading the dismissals, they've been the public face that has been reporting that these are, misguided humanitarians, and that we've been duped by, a political movement that's trying to overthrow the Chinese government by creating allegations of forced organ harvesting.
There are over 11,000 medical journals published, I believe, at the moment around the world. And it is extraordinarily difficult for people to be aware of things. Do you feel there's any possibility or probability that papers that have been written about this issue have simply been missed? And that, therefore, your argument about the moral responsibility for the leaders of these societies to bring it to other people's attention is either stronger or weaker?
That's a really hard question to answer. As I said, I don't know how many papers get rejected. We only saw those that are published, but it's such a big percentage of the ones that are published. And there's some relatively prestigious journals there. The journal with the second largest number of papers is PLOS One, Public Library of Science One. That had published 20 papers, in which a large proportion of them hadn't stated where the organs came from or that the donors gave consent. So yes, it's possible that a lot of journal editors and a lot of reviewers are on the ball, and I've certainly been asked to give my opinion on a couple of papers as to whether or not I think the account of where the organs came from is plausible or not. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And my experience was that the editor, once he became aware of the allegations, was horrified, was very supportive of contacting the authors and trying to get an answer from them, and he went through with his stated intention to retract the paper. But then we had some pushback from the publisher, which we were certainly not expecting. The publishers have international interests, and the Chinese research community is huge and publishes a lot of papers, and it took quite a lot of very skillful negotiating on the part of the editor to get the second letter and the full story about the retraction into the public arena. So I do think there's a conflict of interest for the journals, if they're getting a large proportion of income from China, to not want to publish articles that are going to upset the Chinese. And I do think probably there's been some have just slipped through. People are busy and their time and so forth. But I do think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think it would be to everyone's advantage if the transplant community developed a set of standards that could be internationally implemented, which would record data which would help to show circumstances in which the person whose organs are being used died. So, for example, that there's standardised the descriptions about the time between withdrawal of treatment and cardiac arrest for donation after circulatory death, warm ischemic times and so forth. If the community really got together and promulgated those kinds of standards, it would be much harder for the Chinese to put in a paper where all of the donors were healthy young men between the ages of 20 and 40. Without raising bells.
I have a question. In your time of, while you've been doing this research and work, have you come across any consent forms that are used in China at all? And if you do have any, is there any way to provide that to the tribunal?
I'm sorry, I don't have any, and I don't speak Mandarin, so I wouldn't be able to verify one if I did see one, but I haven't seen any.
slightly over-labouring the same question, but it's quite important in my mind anyway. Is it in any way conceivable, by way of example, that Professor Chapman actually believes what he's saying, or is it willful ignorance and ostensibly a cover-up, much as we've seen in other cover-ups, for instance, the Me Too?
Again, I don't have any kind of particular insights, but I think that he is sincere in what he says. I think he does believe reform has taken place, that they're they do organs from prisoners, they're not doing it anymore. That reform agenda, I think he does believe it. I mean, but what we know about unconsciousness and the psychological tricks we play on ourselves, that's quite plausible. That you take the view that it's human nature to take the view that puts yourself in the best light, and it's a far better light to be crusading someone who's been fooled by the Chinese or someone who's actually duplicitous. I certainly don't believe that Professor Chapman has first-hand knowledge of what's going on and is covering it up. I don't believe that for a minute.
Anybody else? Yes.
Professor Rogers, have you come across any at all instances, or have you heard of any situations where there have been whistleblowers in the research community who have actually acknowledged, in a sense, research that's not complied with what you set out to be internationally accepted norms?
No. The only direct interaction I've had is with the retraction that occurred from the journal Liver International, and there the senior author allegedly said that it was all due to the mistake of a junior staff member, which is a standard excuse used by senior staff members to blame the most junior person. There's not a lot of publicly available information about research misconduct. I'm interested more broadly in research misconduct than just in organ transplantation research, and I've worked had a lot of close conversations with people in psychiatry who have tried to get retractions of papers that have published incomplete and misleading data, and it's very, very difficult to get retractions, and the penalties are not clearly specified, the inquiry processes are not clearly specified, academic misconduct is up to the individual institution. It's a real hornet's nest to try and get to the bottom of allegations about research misconduct, and it's rare for papers to be retracted.
Two further questions.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Two further questions from me, Professor, or maybe three, but the first two about motivation. So far as the willful turning of the blind eye by professionals, is there any possibility, do you think, that the benefits for them, maybe professional knowledge benefits or even other benefits from the multiple transplants that go on in China, may have affected their ability to face up to what is obvious, if it is obvious?
I certainly think that's a possibility. I haven't, and I don't have the expertise to know whether or not the research is particularly cutting edge or interesting, but the volume of transplants in China would certainly put them at the leading edge of transplant technologies and techniques. And this was one of the claims that we received in the first response letter for the retraction, was that they have developed very good skills and they can retrieve more organs than anywhere else in the world, which seems extraordinary. So, for example, in Australia, it's very difficult to retrieve a liver from someone who's who's making a donation after circulatory death because there's a period of low blood pressure and the liver, by the time the person has died, is no longer viable. Whereas the claim was that they retrieve virtually 100% livers, which shows that the donors are dying in a very different way in China than they are in Australia or America. So that's quite problematic. I'm sorry, can you just remind me? I think I've gone off the point. It's quite late here.
The question whether the motivation for turning the blind eye or blinding yourself.
Yeah, look, I think there is motivation to sort of see yourself as a transform the Chinese processes, and so if they haven't changed, then you're not actually a crusader. You're an enabler of unprofessional practices. I think there's probably some valuable data coming out of China, given the volumes of transplants. I'm sure there are new techniques, new drugs. I mean, they've developed all sorts of cheaper generic immunosuppressant drugs, as far as I'm aware. So there are a number of reasons that could all conspire to influence one's view of what's going on. I don't think most of those would be overtly self-interested. I'm not thinking sort of bribery here, but I'm very familiar with psychology of biases and the way that we fool ourselves that we're doing good, and that just does give us tunnel vision sometimes.
My second question on motivation concerns what you tell us was Chapman's reaction to the published documentation about these matters in the update, use of the word concoction. Did he expand and say what particular motivation could have led these researchers to concoct that which was totally false?
He did say it at one point. I think he said it in... He claims that the motivation is political. So he claims that allegations of forced organ harvesting are made by a political group, which he calls the Falun Gong, with the intent of bringing down the Chinese government. And he appears to think this is a correct view of both Falun Gong practitioners and the political system in China, that it's being attacked by this group, and that as part of their attack they promulgate these allegations of forced organ harvesting.
So that Mattis and Kilger and Gutmann are either fooled by, pawns of, or employees of a wicked political group. That's roughly it, is it?
That's roughly it, with the focus, I think, on pawns of rather than anything else.
Two last questions, one from a colleague, but let me finish my two first, and then we won't keep jumping about too much. You explained that there were some limitations to the scale and the capacity of your team, but can you tell us, please, how many people have been engaged on this within your team and over what period of time? Because I want you to tell us if such a team has been unable at all to identify any source of organs apart from claimed volunteers. So size of team, please, and duration of work.
So the teams involve myself and 6 other people. The majority of those are academics. One other person, apart from myself, is medically qualified on the team. One person has a PhD in philosophy, one in neuroscience, one in systems and safety. We also have an ex-journalist and China researcher investigator on the team, and another professional bioethics academic. I'm not aware of any other teams undertaking this kind of work. It's taken us over 18 months so far. We performed the search in April 2017, and we'd already been planning the paper and discussing the methodology, forming the team and working before we did the search, so we would have, I think, formed at the end of 2016. And as I mentioned, I reviewed the proofs of the paper today, so we're nearly at 2 years.
Thank you. And
There's one final
no
element to your-
identification of any organ source apart from the asserted volunteers.
The papers don't say, sorry, I don't think I understood the question.
Yes, that level of research by that team over that period of time with those skills has led to no identification of organs apart from the asserted origin of coming from volunteers.
That is correct. The vast majority did not state where the organs came from, leaving it implicit. I suppose they hoped people would think they were from volunteers, but the only stated organs were that they were from volunteers.
Professor Rogers, I know there's one more question coming from Mr. Vetch, but you should know that the tribunal will not be giving a final judgment today, and it won't be for some months. If you can persuade Chapman or O'Connell or any one of the others who you know has denied the allegations made here to communicate with us and to participate, we'd be grateful. And now for Mr. Vetch.
It's a slightly unfair question in the sense it strays beyond your medical professional. Is it possible that the specific resistance to this from Australian transplant surgeons, as we understand it, is a function of Australia's close proximity to China, and indeed there are a lot of Chinese or ex-Chinese citizens who live in Australia? In other words, the question is, could this be at different levels an overtly political issue?
Look, I think that's a good question. I can't, it is a bit beyond my expertise, but certainly there's a very good book recently published by an Australian academic called Clive Hamilton about the extent of Chinese influence across all spheres of life in China, life in Australia, sorry, including institutions, including obviously in business and trade and so forth. We are very beholden to China in Australia, and those who cooperate with China find deep pockets for research collaboration. And so I think there is a view that we should cooperate, and China's our neighbour, and it behoves us to cooperate with them. And I think that does influence. I think perhaps that does make Australia unusual compared to other English-speaking countries apart from New Zealand.
Professor Rogers, thank you very much for making yourself available to give evidence to the tribunal. Please, if you can bear in mind the requests that have been made to you and the likely timetable before the tribunal delivers its judgment. But for the time being, your evidence is concluded with our thanks.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay.
Our
Thank you very much.
Our next witness is Dr. Anwar Doti, who will give evidence in person. Dr. Doti, hoş geldi. The tribunal will ask you the initial question.
Mr. Toddy, thank you for coming to give evidence. You will understand that the evidence you should give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Toti, thank you very much for submitting your evidence. You are ethnically from the Uyghur tribe, or you speak the language of?
It's not clear.
Do you want a translation?
No, I don't want to translate, but just a little louder.
Good morning, Dr. Tuti.
Hi, good morning.
Are you ethnically an Uyghur, or do you speak the language?
Yes, I'm Uyghur, and I do speak the language.
Thank you. You have been involved in extraction of 3 organs from an executed prisoner. Can you explain to the tribunal how that happened and what was your observation?
Right. It was in 1995. And exactly what day, I don't remember, but it has to be on Wednesday because I was surgeon, and the scheduled surgery day for me is Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. So that Wednesday, I was the only one who doesn't have scheduled surgery. So I think that is why I was picked. And just one day before, it was Tuesday afternoon, my 2 chief surgeons called me into the office and say, "Do you want to do something wild?" I was then a young surgeon with so much passion. I said, "Yes, of course, why not?" And I was actually excited. Then they told me to assemble a team and bring the largest operation equipment which can carry out any size of operation, and ask for nurses and assistants, and to report to them next day morning, 9:30 at hospital gate. So I followed the order. Then next day morning, 9:30, they appeared in a car and telling me, "Follow us." So we were in a van. That van belongs to our hospital. We called it as ambulance. It is not actually an ambulance. It is only a van with a bed in it. There's no equipment, nothing. So we followed the car, and from the direction of travel, I can tell it is towards the Western Mountain area. Because in the Western Mountain area, we have a branch hospital. Because I used to work for a railway central hospital, and there's a branch hospital called the Railway Hospital. I thought we were going there, but on the halfway through, the convoy has turned left, and I got lost because I had never been to that part of the world. So, but our driver, who knows, he said, "This is the way going to the Western Mountain execution ground." So I felt chilled in such summer hot because I don't know the reason why we are going to the execution ground. Even I thought I'm going to killed. I don't know why. So upon the arrival, 2 chief surgeons told us waiting behind a hill and said, "If you hear the gunshots, then you immediately drive around and come in." And we even scared. So we couldn't do anything else but smoking, and because nothing else can ease our nerves. I don't know how much time passed, probably 30 minutes, probably 40 minutes, I don't actually know. We heard gunshots. Before gunshots, we heard that whistle blowing and the people shouting, and it sounded like a group of soldiers or something gathering or mobilizing. Then we heard gunshots. This gunshot is not like machine gun shots. It's like many rifles shot at the same time. You can tell the difference. At that moment, I remembered a movie line when we watched the movie, communist movie, and they said, gunshot, it is the command. So at that time, because I have been told, when you heard the gunshots, you come around. And in my head is, gunshot is command, let's go. So we turned around and we drove in. I was sitting next to the driver. Upon our coming around, from the windscreen and the left window, I can see, I don't know exactly how many corpses, 10 or 20, I don't know. But close to me, not far, there are 5 or 6 corpses lying down on the slope of the hill with prison uniform, and they shaved like me. But what is in common is their forehead blown away, because gunshot is from the back. Then there was a police officer shouting at us, said, go to the far right. The last one is yours. So we went to the far right. And there was one corpse lying down the ground. And this corpse is a little different because he had hair and he was in civilian's uniform. And the gunshot is to his right chest. So our 2 chief surgeons said, okay, now you take this corpse into your one and do as quick as possible to extract the liver and 2 kidneys. And from that moment on, I turned into a robot to carry on the task has been programmed to do. But what I can recall is, along with my scalpel, try to cut through his skin, there was blood can be seen. That indicates the heart was still beating. If heart stopped beating, then blood will not come out. And at the same time, also he was trying to struggle to resist my insertion, but he was too weak to do action against my insertion. I don't know how much time was passed. I extracted liver and 2 kidneys. And to be honestly, I did find this kind of surgery is much easier than the normal surgery, because normal surgery, you have to be careful, you have to do it really carefully, not to damage anything else. But in this case, the only thing you don't want damage, it is the liver. The rest of the organ, it's not your concern. So it is rather quick. I removed them, and the 2 chief surgeons put them into a box, weird box, and told me, now you take your team back to the hospital, and remember, there's nothing happened today. And I know this is another order, command. Since then, we have never, ever talked about this. And that is, things happen.
Dr. Tuti, can you explain this sign that you will see that is also in your report? What does it say in Chinese?
First of all, we can see on the left that is Mandarin, simplified Mandarin. On the right, it looks like Arabic script, but that is Uyghur language. And a sign like this, combined language with those 2 languages, only can be seen in Xinjiang area. And what is that interpretation is special passenger human organ transportation pathway. And this photo taken by someone at an airport in Xinjiang. And that arrow shows towards airport, not towards going outside the airport. That is indicates that wherever this photo taking, that city is massively producing organs. And people taking these organs through this expressway and go into the airplane and distribute to wherever it needed. And then the guy who sent it to me claims this was taken at Kashgar airport. Since I cannot go there, I can't verify it.
You have submitted this morning in a Chinese article, which we will display it, regarding the organ transplant. Is this, yes? Is this the article?
Can I go there to
Yes,
explain?
please, sure. You can use this to explain it today.
Oh, no, I just tried to
Get Professor.
okay. Can you put next page? No, there's another one. Oh, yes, here. Yeah.
First of all, can you inform the tribunal what is this article about?
Can you use the microphone? We can help with our way.
No, down. Yes, okay. This is the title. It says 2 cases of heart and lungs combined transplantation experience. And this is from the city of Kunming Hospital of Yan'an Hospital, cardiologist surgery in Yunnan province.
When was this printed and what?
This was printed in a magazine called Yunnan Medicine in 2008, the 29th volume, 5th version. Look, little up, please. Up. Okay. The thing is, chilling demonstration is here. Operation procedure. Donor brought into theater. And a standard operation procedure followed. And general anesthetic applied. And the tracheal intubation applied. This indicates the donor is alive. Otherwise, they don't need this. They don't need anesthetic. They don't need tracheal intubation if it is dead corpse. But if this is a kidney transplantation, I have no rejection because I can sell one of my kidney and take my money and go home. But this is a combined heart and lungs transplantation. They didn't tell you what happened to the donor after his heart being taken away, because they clearly indicates donor was alive. And then due to the sheer operation, sheer number of transplantation carried out by Chinese surgeon, they even forgot to hide the evidence that they are killing donor at the spot inside medical theater. That is just. And there's another one. No, there's another one. The first one. Image 1. Yeah, just actually, just buy one get one free business pattern shouldn't be seen in this transplantation industry, but unfortunately we are seeing where in China. And this one, it says Hunan Province People's Hospital try to promote the business. They giving away 20 organs for free. How can China afford giving organ away for free? This is clear indication that they have organ of plenty, unlimited supply of organ. To achieve this, you have to keep the organ inside human being and lock them up in a cage waiting to be the organ to be taken on demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tuti. The tribunal would now have some questions.
Dr. Totti, thank you very much for coming and giving your evidence today.
Thank you.
Can I just take you back to your involvement in the organ donation, and just for clarity,
Yeah.
could you explain the hierarchy, the leadership structure which allowed you or made it necessary for you to go and follow the orders of your chief surgeons? You said you were a junior surgeon, but how does that organization work?
Sure. Chinese medical system, before they reformed in 2002, this period. Before that, whole Chinese is one employer, that is the state. And everybody else, apart from farmer and peasants, apart from them, all the rest, they are working for the state. So state is your only employer. And besides this, the railway system in whole China, it is a sub-militarized system. So we, as doctor, we have two sets of uniform. One is the white, which we wear inside hospital. Another one is greenish, bluish, which we wear as the worker of the staff of the railway system. That head, it's like military head. And then the system is operated like a military system by order. You don't ask question, you only take order.
Thank you.
So, sorry, in the hospital, you have to be a house officer, then physician, then junior consultant, then consultant. By that time, I was physician, and I had two chief surgeons as my superior.
And exactly, this was in the Railway Central Hospital. Where is that?
It is in the north of Urumqi. It's called Henan Road, number 9, Henan Road. And it used to be called the Urumqi Central Railway Hospital, but after medical reform, now it is the branch hospital of Xinjiang Medical University, the 5th branch hospital of Medical University of Xinjiang.
And the date that could you remind us of the date, or the as close as possible to the year in which this was happening? When did this occur, that you had to go and take the organ out?
1995.
Thank you. And as I understand it from your evidence, the senior surgeons, your bosses as it were, came with you to the execution site.
Yeah, that's true.
So they were maintaining this ordering of you right to the last minute.
And one purpose is to maintain the order, and second purpose is since I had never done such thing, so they will stand next to me on my left, to my left, and instructing me, cut this, go through there. So the whole operation I did was under the guidance or leading. So they were telling me.
So were you aware, or could you have been aware of either the identity or the ethnic origin of the victim?
No. And since people in Xinjiang, they are the most mixed population in the world, even those Uyghur people, they have many different color and shape. So it is impossible to tell if he was Uyghur or if he was Chinese or if he was Mongolian or no, you can't. So that's why since I come to this country, I often go to mosque, church, temple to pray for him because I know one of them will go to him.
And are you aware of any other person or other doctor from your time then or since who have been involved in or forced to do similar procedures?
As I stated, that this is sub-militarized system. So when they have been told, don't say anything, they do follow the order. So they will not say anything. Just like my case, we never ever talked about it. But there is a little indication that the driver of the van, he has been to the execution ground because he knew the way.
Yeah.
That is the only indication.
So if you are intending these organs to be used for transplantation, normal practice would be to tissue type the donor and the recipient to ensure a good match. Under the circumstances you describe, would either have had to have been done beforehand or not matched? What do you think was the situation?
By that time, I had no idea about this massive organ harvesting. And I only thought they are conducting an experiment. And since I was a physician, and as considered by them, it is a low-ranking surgeon. So probably I'm not qualified enough to know that much. So what happened beforehand and what happened after they took organs, I have no idea.
Okay. Were you aware of transplantation taking place in the railway hospital at the time?
Not the railway hospital at that time, but I was aware that there are people stealing organs as early as 1990.
Thank you. So can I take you now to the end of your evidence where you talk about the number of organs currently being or potentially being taken from the Uyghur population. You have a view, I think, about that and have heard from others that this process is going on even now. Could you explain to us how you've come to those conclusions and who you heard from and what your thoughts are?
I made this assumption or conclusion like this. If they can achieve, they can find an organ in as short as 4 hours' time, it indicates they have plenty of stock back of the building somewhere. And since this organs is not like meat, you can buy from the supermarket and put into your freezer and eat 10 years later. Organ doesn't work like that. Organ, probably the longest time you can keep is probably only 10 hours. So how can you achieve this? The only indication is you have plenty of human being being kept in somewhere. And where those human beings are come from? Then I look some other sources. For example, the Secretary of the World Uyghur Congress, Dolkun Issa, has been said in his speech 2007 that since 1995 until 2007, there has been 100,000 Uyghur people gone missing, and still we don't know where about. Because once you go missing, once you have been taken to the jail, then you're gone. You can't find them. So I suspect they gone missing. I suspect that they have gone to this organ pool. And not only that, since our campaigning with Ethan Gutman, David Mattes, David Kilgore, our against human rights organ harvesting campaigning, that Falun Gong issue was well aware by the world. Then Chinese, they needed a new sources. So in 2016, June 2016, they launched a campaign under the name of improving the minorities' health. They started taking blood samples from Uyghur population. And that raised another suspicion, because do health checkup, national health checkup, you only carry this when in that region there's unknown disease or unknown pandemic. Then you may do health checkup, try to find out where this disease is coming from. But if there's none of them, with no reason, you don't do health checkup, because that is a very expensive thing to do. But Chinese did. And then, strangely, they only did to the Uyghur nation, ethnic group. Despite there's many Chinese, Kazakh people, other minority living there. So I suspect they taking this blood sample, it is to build up the online database so that they could find a matched tissue from the screen. And then in 2007, this campaign became DNA collection. And they said it is under the need for anti-terrorism. So they need to collect DNA sample. Again, DNA sample can be collected with just swab your cheek, but they still taking blood sample. So I assume they are still doing the tissue match under the disguise of DNA sample collecting. And recently, they have locked up millions of Uyghur people, and this gives them even convenient source for the organs, because since you are behind the bar, and you are nobody, and outside you cannot ask any questions.
Have you, because you clearly have a profound and self-evident interest in this, have any other people whom you know approached you to say that organ harvesting has happened to someone they know, a relative or a friend? Have you become aware of more direct evidence of individuals having their organs harvested?
So far, no. I know why. Since that Chinese regime is such a regime, they have the hand on you even you are living in the West. Because think like this, every single person from mainland China, they have a invisible gun pointed to the head. So when they say something, the gun will fire. But this gun is not visible to the West. Those people, they knew what will happen. So they have no choice but keep silence, try to avoid any trouble. From here, I would like to give you another experience which I experienced in 1990. In 1990, I was intern sitting in the outpatient department of our hospital. Since I was the very few, only 3 of us who speaks local language, so local people, they come to me for medical examinations. And one day, one man brought his teenager son and approached me and asked me to examine his son if there's an organ gone missing. And I said, why you are doing this? And he said, in the village, there's rumor in the air that the people are stealing organs, kidneys. And then his son has gone missing for 3 months and only found last week. So he's asking me to examine. I didn't find any scar on his son's body, so I told him everything seems fine. But during that period, 6 months, as outpatient department, I have seen more than 100 children, and 3 of them, they had such shaped scar on their body. And this shaped scar is only be used to remove kidney, because kidney, it is so deep, so you have to cut so big to open it up. 3 of them. That is in 1990. So I believe this massive organ stealing or organ pillaging, it started as early as 1990, and they are still doing it.
I have 3 questions, I
Please.
think, which are susceptible to yes/no answers because we're running out of time, and then I'll see if my colleagues have others.
Sure.
First question from your statement. When you were taken to the execution site, were there already nurses there preparing the body for you? Just yes or no?
I brought a nurse with me.
Aha.
Yeah.
A second question, did you avoid ever doing this again? Did you have to take steps to avoid doing this again?
No, because, as I said, I was the only one picked up by chance. And since then, I kept quiet, and nobody asked me to do it again.
Third question, you've been talking about your experience around the world, I don't know, for many years.
Yes.
Has China in any form ever challenged the accuracy of your account?
Not directly to me, but I do receive indirectly threats.
And the threats, first of all, how serious are the threats? And second, are you able to trace their origin at all?
I can trace their origin, yes, I can. And the threat, I also know it is serious.
Are you willing to explain publicly the source and nature of the threats, or would you rather do that privately?
I wish rather do this privately to you.
We'll ask you to put that in writing before you leave.
Sure.
You don't set out in your statement, this is my last question, the consequences of you as an individual being required to do this act, but you have set it out elsewhere, haven't you, in testimony and statement that is private, the psychological and other effects on you.
Can you say it shortly again, please?
Yes,
Sorry.
you set out elsewhere
Yeah,
the effect on you of
Yeah.
being forced to do this killing.
yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned children, 3 children who had large scars indicating removal of a kidney. How old were those children?
Teenagers.
Teenagers, meaning 12 or meaning 18?
It's just rather younger.
Younger, so sort of
It's just like probably under 15.
under 15.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming to the tribunal to give your evidence. Subject to providing that written piece of evidence, if you will, to Mr. Sabi, you're now free to go, or to stay, of course, in the audience, not the audience,
Thank
the
you.
public sector of the tribunal.
Thank you.
Huh?
Miss Liu is joining us next on Skype from Finland.
Thank you, Ms. Nice.
您好，刘女士。
Good morning.
刘女士您好。哎呀，刘女士您好，
Good
你能
morning.
听见吗？
哎，能听见。
能听见，哎，太好了，太好了，我们现在
好
准备开始了啊。
Can you can
好。
hear us?
Yes, she can.
Thank you for making yourself available to the tribunal to give evidence. Please be sure that what you tell us is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Ms. Knight?
Good morning, Miss Lee. Thank you again for joining us. We have had the benefit of seeing your witness statement before today, but would like to ask you a few other questions.
谢谢刘女士，谢谢您今天来我们这个法庭上，我们想问您一些问题，就是借着今天这个机会问您一些问题，请问可以吗？
可以。
Yes.
Thank you. How many times have you been detained?
您总共被拘捕多少次？
被绑架9次。
9 times.
And how many different detention centres have you been taken to?
您被带到过多少个拘留所？
十几个就这个具体。
About 10, over 10, but concretely,
9次。
out of the 9 times,
十几次吧，十几个地方吧。
yes, over 10 detention centers.
And what was the reason given for the detention?
他们为什么要拘捕你？
因为我学法轮功。
Because I practice Falun Gong.
Did you ever have legal representation?
请问您有律师吗？当时？
国内不清楚。
No, in China, such things, no, they don't allow it.
Could you describe the reference you make in your statement to organ harvesting?
请问您能对您的这个证词里面的活体器官摘除的这个做一个简要的说明？
哦，这个是我在2000年的12月。
It was
30日以后去北京上访。
It was when I went to petition in Beijing in December 2000.
要告诉世人法轮功好。
On the 31st of December 2000, I went to Beijing to petition in order to tell people that Falun Gong was good.
抓出去是殴打。
and I was taken away by the police, and they
打完之后呢，
beat me.
就给我们强行的，绑架的一个，就是天安门周围有一个
And did they say
大客
anything?
车。你还需要给他翻译吗？还是我把话说完？
你把话说完。
完之后呢，在天安门，我就被那个绑架到大客车上了。
They took me away
法律学院。
in the
之
van.
后到晚上呢，又给送到天安门前门派出所那个大院里。那大院里有8、9百人吧。完在那关了。
And they took me to a detention center belonging to the Public Security Bureau, and I spent the night there.
宣武区。
And then I was taken to the detention center in Shenwu district of Beijing City, and during my time there,
报自己的姓名和地址。
they asked me to give my name and my address. I didn't give them.
给了一张表。
And then I was given a form.
那个告江的名，那正好有个表，你就填。 完我就把那表填完之
and
后
asked me to fill it in.
你要填真实的姓名地址。
And I filled it.
填的一切都是我的正确的，但名字那个地方呢，我就犹豫了。所以我要填
I
了之
gave
后呢，不但不能
true information, but
那
I
个去说明这个问题，
was hesitating
有可
about the
能给
name.
我绑架关起来。所以当时
Because
我就
if I
没有填那个
gave them my
名字
real name, I
之后呢，
would have bad consequences, so I didn't give
没有填
did
那
give them my
名字之后
name.
呢，对，因为不是一开始我是报了个名字，报了我的乳名，乳名就是小孩的那个家长的起的
Initially, I
小名
gave them my pet name in my family, but when they checked it, it didn't exist.
就是当地的驻京办事处的警察就给你就遣送回本地区，他一查没有我的名字，所以我就在被看守所那关押。
Because the name didn't exist officially, I stayed in the detention center, and they took photos of me,
让我写笔录，
and
所以我
they
也写。完了拍照呢，我就是闭着眼睛，就是不照吧。完他就找了几个，当时是3个警察，是4个警察。
I refused to be taking photos.
被关押的，就是说是犯人吧，男的，8大校园的。之后来了之后呢，完他们那个警察就说，他你不报姓名和地址，将来就给你就是。
And the many policemen came to threaten me. They said, if you don't give us your name and address and other information, we will take your organs away, and your family won't find your corpse.
我可能是，我就当时想他是威胁我，让我逼着我让我说。
And then I thought it was just a method of threat.
所以我就没有说，当时他就那么。
So I didn't say it.
这是警察跟我是这么讲的。
So that's what the police told me.
我呢就被关到仓里了，就是那个关犯人的那个屋子里吧。
Afterwards, I was locked in a cell
就是铁笼子似的，
for prisoners, and whose door was iron.
被关押的一些人就连就是问我。
And the inmates there asked me what my name was and for what reason I got in. I said I didn't give the policeman my name, and they said, "Oh, then you're in trouble because they will bother you."
Did you have any medical testing at any of the detention centres you were at?
Sorry, could you ask that question again?
Did she undergo any medical procedures or tests?
他们有没有对你进行一些体检啊这样子的？
对我那个到那之后呢，我就是被关进仓里了。之后呢，给我体检了。
Yes, after I was put in a cell, afterwards they performed medical checks on me. I didn't know the others. They drew my blood. At the time, there were over 10 people. I was in the queue. They asked me to put my hands behind my head and crouch down. I refused to do so. I said, I'm not a prisoner, I can't do this. And then the policeman came to me and then kicked me into the crouching position. And then I wasn't able to get up. And so I went to the place for physical checks, and the doctor was a prison doctor belonging to the detention center. She took my blood. When I was waiting there, I saw through the very big window pane, there were many people analyzing something. Now, as far as I remember, I didn't know what they were looking for. When they were
你说慢一点好吗？
好。我基本上说完了，能听清楚吗？还有重新说吗？
不用了。
And did she see any of that treatment, or was she aware of any of that treatment happening to any other prisoners or detainees?
其他的，你有看见过其他的犯人也有受到这样的体检吗？
当时就是我们遇到那几个人，再也没看见，因为那个进到厂里之后呢，就和谁也不知道外界的情况。
I was not sure because once I was locked in a cell, I was not sure what was going on outside.
不报姓名惨呢，因为他们经常人进去了之后呢，待2天，这人就没了，走了，上哪去了他们也不知道。
They say you are in trouble because usually when the prisoners was sent in 1 or 2 days, they would despair.
Thank you very much. I believe the panel have further questions.
接下来
Hello. Can you confirm that 1999 was the time you were placed in detention?
你可不可以确认一下，在1999年的时候，是你第一次被关留拘押？
那个不是第一次了。
Well, that was not the first time. That was in Beijing.
4次吧。
That was the fourth time.
1999年
Because I was
7月20号第一次。
The first time was July 20th, 1999. Afterwards,
So prior
July 23rd,
到我家不走了。
the police came to my home and didn't want to go. And then afterwards,
99年的
1999,
23号在广州。
November 23rd in Guangzhou.
就是因为迫害之后，那是一次
After persecution.
法轮大法，就是国内一个交流会。
prior
Because that was the conference, experience sharing conference after the persecution. Then that was a kidnap.
他就用录像录完之后，
稍等一下。
当时那
Because I didn't tell them my address, so they did some recording. 请说。
当时那个录像呢，就给我录像。
Okay, prior to 1999, when she was in China, did she ever hear about organ harvesting
1999
happening to the Falun Gong?
1999年之前，你在中国有没有听到有关于强摘器官的事情？在中国
没有。
？No.
When she was in detention in the various places, did she ever see other people besides Falun Gong members in detention?
您有没有见到过除了法轮功学员以外，其他的人被关押？
关押，那个期间那关押都是一些其他的犯罪吧，而且在79年
，at the time, it was all prisoners like other than Falun Gong practitioners.
放的一些犯人，说关的都是因为当时那个时候学法轮功
And other prisoners
他抓的也很多，所以都关不进去了，把犯人给放了，把我们好人给关进去。当时有这种情况。
Right. At the time, there were so many people practicing practitioners. A lot of prisons released other prisoners, and in order to accommodate Falun Gong practitioners.
Okay. In your statement, you write here that you have sued the premier Zemin in China. Was she attempting to sue him, or did she actually sue him? Because she also says that she had materials on suing Zemin.
还是您有意告他？因为您说您有这方面的文件，在警察抄家的时候。哦。
对，因为这次那个在2002年的9月份。
In September 2002, there was a rights activist and 2 Falun Gong practitioners because there was no way where to sue him because he was the leader of the country. But then we were persecuted very cruelly. My sister was persecuted to death in April 2004. And after so many times of kidnapping me, because I resisted and protested, that's why I was. That's why someone came to me in order to sue Jiang Zemin. Wherever I went, the door was closed on me.
所以我当然我挺高兴啊，所以就把我就是这三位人就把我给录像了，就是我们家的照片。
Then in the end, these 3 people took a video of me. At the time, my parents were in their 70s. They had white hair. In any case, my bones were broken. That's why they took a video of me in order to send it to international court. At the time, over 100 people put down their real names. And they were telling the truth about the prisons and the detention centers. And then the Chinese police took the video away. And then we were mass detained and imprisoned. At the time,
公安局的局长，所以那个时候，
波西来 was in power
杀绝，安军一个
and
也不
said
漏，
that
所以当时
we have
对我
to.
们这些打的，
Boshilai said that we need to eradicate all these people until the very last one, and with any torturing
那
methods.
个期间，有迫害致死的，有迫害致死生的。所以现在有好多。
During that time, there were people who were persecuted to death. There were people who became insane as a result of persecution and torture.
Okay. Can I'm curious. One of my colleagues wants to know, why did she refuse to identify herself to the police?
Sorry, which period? Because she mentioned a few periods that she.
Yeah, on any of the occasions that she. In general, just ask her. You know, during the times that she was in detention and she refused to, why? Why didn't she give her
比较
identity
好
to
奇
the
的就是说，
police?
您在被拘留的时候，为什么不愿透露自己的真实姓名？
不愿意透露自己的姓名，原因是签到
The
You
reason
can ask her about specifically January 2002.
工作单位的领导，还有你所住处的。
等一下，他就是说，
OK
就是2002年的时候，您在被捕的时候，为什么那次不愿意透露姓名？
因为那个不是2002年，就是你到北京上访，只要你报了自己的真实姓名，
It's not just that year. As long as you go to Beijing and as long as you go to Beijing and tell them your real name and address, you will be punished. And including your family members, they will be punished. Your the cadres in your workplace will be associated, will be negatively impacted by you as well, and including the residents where you live, including the local council. So I didn't want all these people to get into trouble because of me.
Okay. And apart from January, when she was in January 2001, aside from that time, did she undergo any other medical examinations?
2001年1月的时候，您有没有接受过体检？
2001年1月，对呀，我就那个时候在北京体检过。
Yeah, at the time, 除了那次以外呢？
除了那次以外，在铁岭那个时候，他也被铁岭也被体检过。
Apart from that time, I received physical checks in Tieling. That was when I was.
什么那个时候，我的生命都垂危了，而且检查完事之后，他没有，所以说应该按道理来说，检查之后生命垂危应该搁医院居住治疗，没有，等一下就。
I was on hunger strike, and as a result of that, they performed physical checks on me. And they tested my blood pressure, and they came to realization that I was on the verge of death.
Okay. I have two colleagues that want to ask questions, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to them.
First of all, as to the anonymity in prison, did you maintain your anonymity in prison at all times?
请问您在被关押
throughout all arrests?
请问您在被关押期间，是不是整个这个被关押期间都是匿名的？
你再说一遍，我没听。
请问您在整个的在中国被关押的期间，是不是一直都是隐瞒您的真实姓名？
那个在当地，那就是他知道我的姓名和地址。在北京和
Locally,
他不知道，但是呢。
Locally, of course, people were aware of my name, but in Beijing and Tieling,
他都不知道，他就愣编一个名字， 另变一个年龄，因为我是有工作的，他就另变一个农民，所以他们只要
In Beijing and Tianjin, they were not sure. They were.
造假。
They didn't know my age, and it's very dialectal.
Did other Falun Gong practitioners who were arrested pursue the same policy of anonymity to protect their friends, neighbors, and workmates?
请问其他的法轮功学员有没有跟您一样隐瞒自己的姓名？就是说为了他们所认识的人的安全。
对呀，大部分都不报姓名。
Yes, most of them
你报了姓名地址
hid their real names and addresses because, as I said, you would be taken away from Beijing to be repatriated to your home provinces.
冠军之后，那你就
等一下，请等一下。
没有你再去讲真相失去机会了。所以大部分这些法轮功学员都是为别人考虑。 所以宁可自己承受那个遭遇迫害，
you know, you would have consequences on other people, and other people wouldn't have a chance to raise your case in future. So most of Falun Gong practitioners would practice anonymity. They would rather go through these misfortunes themselves than other people also go through such things.
That mean that there were in Chinese prisons a reservoir of people who were anonymous, thereby available to be used by the Chinese authorities for organ harvesting if they wish.
您觉得这样的就是说不透露自己真实姓名的，在这个拘留所还有监狱里面，是不是这样就给中国政府一个比较容易的一个机会？进行活体器官摘除，因为有这样一批的不愿透露自己姓名的法轮功学员，这样给中国政府就是一个很好的机会，很好的一个可以隐瞒的一个活体器官摘除的一个这个理由。您是不是觉得？
对，是我认为是因为什么呢？这些人不报姓名地址，而
请等一下，请等一下。
这些呢，学法轮功的身体健康。他编个号，他编个号之后呢，完跟你身体进行检查，完不管你什么是那个血型啊，还有什么，全部做检查之后，他建了个档案，他随时随地就可以。
Yes, they would build a
器官库了。所以这个中共他现在，他就是这样啊，他就是，给他就创造个方便条件了。
They would record all the results of physical checks on everyone, and of course this would facilitate organ harvesting.
Were the examinations done in buildings or in a van?
请问体检的是在是在楼里还是在比如说车里？
我本人是在那个他们医务室那屋里。
Personally, I was checked in the clinic.
在医院里。
In the hospital. And yeah. Both times I was checked, I was in the hospital. Because
不好的话，也就是那只能检查一下，那个就简单的做一下那个常规检查。
Because if you are of ill health, they can only do simple tests on you.
那个肝功啊和各方面啊，我觉得那就是他就是建立一个。
So if you have to complicate a test, then I feel that they want to keep records. That's why.
Thank you. And Mr. Vetch first, and one of my other colleagues second.
This question is entirely at her discretion, but if she would like to tell the tribunal. And the wider world, what happened to her by way of torture in detention, then this is the opportunity for her to do so. But if she would rather not, then that is entirely
这个问题
understood.
您可以回答，也可以不回答。就是您能不能您能不能说一下您是具体被怎样被折磨的在狱中？
哦，我在被折磨，
对不起，
就是
对不起
挺残
请
酷的。
您再重说一遍，说慢一点，谢谢。
哦，您说是什么？你是被酷刑吧？是吧？
对他刚才问的问题，你再回答一次，
就是
谢谢。
对，我是被遭受的酷刑，比较挺特殊，像电棍，用电棍就是过
I
我的嘴。
received this
他让你过我
cruel
的嘴的原
treatment.
因，
It was a
他
bit
让我
unusual case.
爆出
They
来
use electric
其他
batons.
别人那个法律学员，比方说我们那个
Because
被
they asked
抓
me
了
to tell
被
them
抓之后呢，
other
分走和
practitioners'
谁
name.
都
After
有
we were
谁
arrested,
报
they asked me
让你
who
说，
else
他说
were
你
with
不
you.
说呢，他就用
They
电
asked me
棍
to
就是
tell
电棍
their names.
过我的
If I
嘴。
don't tell them, they use
完
the
再一个
electric
呢，还有
baton into
在
my
北京
mouth.
期间呢，他就拿那个
Other than
板
that,
条
in Beijing,
这么宽的
they use
这么
this
宽的
wooden
这么宽的板
slat,
子，这么厚，
this wide,
长长的，
this thick,
能有
very long.
7、8
It's about
米
7 to 8
大板子
meters.
上面写着我们师傅的名字，
70 to 80
抽脸。
centimeters.
完之后呢，
And then
给
they
我绑在
slap
那
that
个
on my face.
床上。
Afterwards, they also
这
tie
是
me on a
酷
bed,
刑。再一个还有这个酷刑呢是
treat me
我呢
crudely.
就是脖子一个套个就是一个
So
环儿，
my neck
这个环儿吧有个别人，
was
别上有
put
个
on
锁，
an iron
这个
ring
锁呢
and with
直
a
接钉
lock.
到地下，地下
So
呢
this kind of
也钉
lock
个铁
was
环儿，
tied to
这个铁
chain
环两个都
to
没有
the
距离。
floor,
这个
and there's
铁
a
环儿
little
这个环儿
iron
和那个
ring
锁头那个明锁，锁和这个锁
between the ring and the
脖子
lock.
就直接钉到地上，我的两个胳
With my
膊
neck
还是
was
反背子，
chained to the
他
floor,
就给我钉到地下，钉了
and
长达
my
16
neck
个小时，
still tied
这
onto
是
the
一个
bed.
酷刑。
So they
再一
fixed
个
me
酷
onto
刑
this
是
for
这个
more
手
than
和这个
10 hours.
手和这边手
The other
两个
treatment was they
手
they
手铐
handcuffed my
手
both
铐是
hands
拉直，拉直之后
and
两个腿
pull
呢就是躺在
straight
地
of
上之后
my
呢是
arms,
伸直的，
and then
伸直之后呢。
so they also pull my arms and lie on the bed.
那个铁镣
When
那
was
个
this
给
all
把
stretched,
脚给缠
the
上之后，
leg
铁
was
镣再钉到
also
地上，
with
你
this
是
iron
没法
fixed
没
onto
法
the
动
floor.
弹，就是这么的。他这个给我
So you
钉了
couldn't
58
couldn't
天，
move at all.
而且他在这
So
钉
they
他期
fixed me
间
on
呢，
that for 58
他们
days.
就是给我
And during
灌
that
食，
58 days,
因为我那时候是绝食抗议，
they
所以我也
force
不是犯
feed
人，
me
我说我不
because
在这
I
属
was
于
on
这
hunger
个犯
strike.
人
Because
属于
I'm not
犯
a
人
prisoner,
犯
I'm not
啊，
a
我说我
criminal.
是属于
I
做好
I
人，我说
I
我
did
没有罪，
I
他
am a
我
good person.
我就
I'm
绝
not a
食，他就
criminal.
灌
I'm not
食，
guilty.
灌食的那种管儿啊，
So
是
I
从鼻
did a
子
hunger strike,
穿到
and they
胃里，
force
插
fed
到胃
me.
里
They put on a
去
tube
灌。
through the
因为当
nose
时灌的时候
into
呢，
my
他那个
stomach.
牙
Because at
齿，
that time when they
他
first
有
met
还有
me,
那个，
the
这是一
my
个
my
灌食的
teeth.
方式。灌了之后呢，他就用那个
This is
小
one
盆
way
儿，
of
是放
force
那什
feed.
么玉米糊，
They
有
they
时候
use
还
a
放那个
container.
拌的洗衣的水，还有尿液，特别是那个
They use those
铁里那个像
urines
很大
and
盆
sometimes
这个
the
玉米
rice, the
他往
wash
里
water of the
吐
rice and
痰，
urines.
就是
They
痰，他
and
抽
they
的那个
spit
烟
into that
烟灰往里
container
弹
of all
完
these
之后就
liquid,
给我灌到这胃
and
里了。
they
那
also
个
put
时
the
候是
ashes of
一
their
天
smokes
灌3次
into this
2次
container, and then
后来
they
就是
they
半个
force fed
月
me all
嗯
this
他那
liquid
管儿就不留
into
止在
me
胃里了，被留
2-3
在胃里
times
之后
a day.
呢，他灌
So
的时候就给你往那
they
个小管
leave
里
the
灌进去，
they left the tube
完那
into
个
my
之后就
body,
会流
and they
止，
just use the tube to
流
force
止之
fed
后呢，
me.
他就是在
So
最
all
后
these
拽出来的时候呢，
the tube stay in my
这
body.
个它管儿
At the end,
白
they
管
pull
儿
out
是
this
乳白
tube.
的，乳白的
It's
呢，但
it's
是
a white
我
color
胃上
tube,
面儿哈，胃上面儿这上边儿是已经变成
but
黄的了，
above the
下
stomach,
边儿呢就是那
the
个
tube
管儿
became
已经
yellow
变成
color.
沾了很
Below
多的
that,
毛，
the
就是
tube has
是黑色的，
the tube has become black. So they have So they fixed me there for 58, and they force-fed me for 58 days. And that time, my eyes, my ears, and my throat, I lost my hearing ability. It's all damaged, my throat, my eyes. Because when they were force-fed me, I couldn't follow them. I resisted. So they pull my hair, force me into the floor, and they asked the male prisoner to ride on me, to ride on my body. They are hooligans. After that, my hands were, they force-fed me, and they found some criminals.
Thank you very much.
谢谢。
Mr. Waldron.
I'd like to ask a sensitive question.
我想问你一个敏感的问题。
Were you subject to any sexual mistreatment? That would include a removal of your clothes, touching of your body, threats of rape, or actual rape. In Chinese, they say 侮辱女人, which is not understood by most English speakers. But any specific example of sexual crime or threats
我想问你一个
thereof?
比较敏感的问题：你在被拘留关押的期间，是不是有受到过任何性侮辱、对女性的性侮辱？这样的事情包括脱掉你的衣服，或者是威胁、强暴等等任何这样的事情。那么这个词可能对于一般的西方说英语的人可能不太清楚，但是你有没有受过任何像这样的性侮辱的待遇？
他就是被绑架之后被抓到，他就是。
After I was kidnapped, they touched me. They touched my body.
包括警察。
Yes,
他不只是犯人，
including
警
the
察也是那样。
policemen. Not only criminals, also the policemen. Because I received such a severe persecution. Had I not received such a persecution, I wouldn't realize that all these Chinese communist police, they are such a bad person. Anything they could do. I'm already such an old person. 谢谢。
Madam Liu,
非常
thank
感谢
you
您
very much for making yourself
能
available
够
to
在
give
这边提
evidence
出你的
and
证
for
词，
being so open with us about matters that will have
而且
been
对我
difficult.
们这么的开诚布公，讲出这些事情。
If there is anything that you feel should be covered that you haven't mentioned, please do so now.
在中国是没有人权。
I want to thank you because there's no human rights in China.
律师、法庭表示
I can only use
感
this
谢你们，而且
opportunity
我也
and this
替
tribunal
关押的法律部没有
to
说
say
话
that
的
I want
地
to
方，
thank
所以
you
感
so
谢你们。
much. I want to thank you on behalf of those people who cannot speak up for themselves. I appreciate on behalf of all these
Madam,
people.
the thanks are due to you. And as I was nearly saying, If you feel we've missed anything of importance that you would like to add, please do so now. Otherwise, your evidence is
我非常的
concluded.
感谢你。我想问你，除了你刚才所讲的，你觉得还有没有什么事情是漏掉我们没问你的？请你趁这个机会能够说出来。如果没有的话呢，您的证词会到一个段落。有没有什么其他的还想要说的？听到吗？请问一下。
听不清。
哦。
听不清，网络。
Hold on 1 second, internet was not very clear. Hold on.
哎，他的那个。
你听到吗？现在？
那谁呀？那谁？那个小李呢？应该把他那个。把他那个叫什么？把这个摘下去，这个下去。
He said the internet is not connection is not stable, so they are trying to sort out.
老有信号，对，老有信号。
没有。
他刚才就是问你说，除了你刚才所讲的，他们问你的，你觉得还有没有什么漏掉的一些信息，你想要告诉大家的？你可以现在告诉大家。如果没有的话呢，你的证词就到此结束。还有没有什么想要说的？
想要说的就是，就是关于活摘器官这个事情。
I want to say about live organ harvesting. My 2 other sisters in Masanja was illegally sentenced. Was detained. And the practitioners detained along with them were also my friends. I was close to them. They passed away, but at that time they told me when they were there, because my sister didn't let us know about the situation then, because they didn't want the family to worry. So I didn't tell my families about those things. So they told me that they went through so much ill treatment and affected the health. They told me so much, I couldn't clearly remember everything. But they told me that the health check was systematic and very thoroughly. They went through the health check at that time. They told me so because they passed away.
Thank you, madam. You honor yourself and your sisters by what you have been able to tell us.
他们非常感谢你。
Thank you.
也因为你告诉了这些事实、这些真相，你也荣耀了你的朋友和你的姐姐。
Thank you.
谢谢。
Our
好了，
next
我们这个
witness,
结束了，谢谢。
Chairman, is
Let's just see the images going. Right.
our next witness is Li
Right.
Lin Lin. Our next witness is
joining us from
Li
New York.
Lin Lin,
Yes.
joining us from New York.
Yes. She's scheduled for 30 minutes, I think. Scheduled for 30 minutes, I think.
Yes. The testimony is at page 348. The testimony is at page 348. Good morning, Miss Lee. Good morning, Miss Lee. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good morning.
你听得到吗？你好，听得到吗？ I'm trying to talk to her. Just wait for 1 second, please. 到吗？您好，您贵姓？
可以听到。我
李女士
姓李。
您好。好，现在我们要开始了
你好。
哈。等一下我会帮您做翻译。
Okay.
Yes, she can hear us now.
The chairman will ask question.
Thank you very
非常
much
感谢
for
您
making
能够
yourself
来这边
available to
特
give
别法
evidence
庭
to
来
this
做证词。
tribunal. I'm sure you understand. We hope that you will tell us the
请
truth,
您
the
告
whole
诉我
truth,
们
and
事实
nothing
的
but
真相，你只能说实话。
OK， 好。
Yes.
Ms. Lee, you were arrested at the beginning of 2005 in Shanghai, where you were working and were
您2005年的时候在上海
sentenced to
被
3.5 years
拘留
imprisonment.
3
Can you explain for the tribunal that
3
whether
年
there
半的
was
时
any
间你被
proper
拘留？
judicial process or any process at all for
你
this
是不是可以
sentencing?
告诉
是
这个法庭，你当时有没有被拘留关押的时候呢，有没有任何的法律诉讼程序？
有。
Yes.
Can you explain the judicial process that sentenced you to 3.5 years?
你可不可以稍微说明一下？你可不可以说明一下你的法律程序？
就是他先公安局先把我逮捕，然后就是检察院
The
提
Public
起诉
Security
讼，
Bureau
然后
arrested
后来
me
就是到05年8月份开庭。
in August
但是他不
2005
允许律师给
was
我
the
做无
first
罪辩
trial,
护。
but they don't allow the lawyer to plead not guilty. 可以继续说。
然后是08年9月15号把我送到
September
上海
15,
市松江女子监狱
I was
关
sent
就是关
to
押。
Songjiang District female prisoner to
然
be
后在
detained.
关押期间，
During that time,
就我一直到08年7月7号释放，一
until
共是3
7th
年0 6个月。
July 2008, altogether is 3 years and 6
还有
months.
就是他采用的
In addition
对我判刑的条款，说是我破坏了法律实施，但是我只是给普通的民众陈述法轮功的真相，我觉得我没有犯罪，更没有破坏法律的实施。所以我在他们判决书上没有签字。
So they sentenced me as undermined implementation of the law, but I was mainly just try to tell people the truth of Falun Gong. There was no crime, so I didn't really undermine the law, so I didn't sign on the paper.
Yes, so
就
while
是
you were
整个过
detained,
程基本上就是这些。
so while you were detained,
你被拘留的
you were
期间
medically checked in prison. Can you explain that, how this happened and what was the
在
purpose?
拘留的期间，你有曾经被做过身体的检查，你可不可以解释一下为什么会有这个检查？
当时大概是08年不是05年的
At that time it was
10月底和10
approximately
月初的
October
样子，11月初的样子。我记得当时穿了2件衣服。
In the
然后
beginning
有
of
一天，他
October,
突然告诉
I
我
had
说要
2
对我
pieces of
进行
clothes.
给我们
All of
体
a
检，
sudden,
就是
they
说
asked,
关心我
they
们
tell
身
me
体，要
that
给
they
我做
wanted
体
to
检。
do a health
那
check,
天
and
我
because they
被
care
带去
about
体检的除
our
了我，
health,
还有
so they
另外一
wanted to do
个
a
叫
check.
王毅毅
So at
的，
that time, there
他
was
也是个法
another
轮功学
person
员。当时
who
我
is
们2
also
个
a
都没
Falun
有
Gong
转化，
practitioner. At that
就是
time, we
当时
did
带我
not
们2
renounce
个
our
去体检。
beliefs. So they
我
took
当时
the
很
2 of
奇怪，为什
us
么带我们
for
2
health
个，
check.
其他人为什
I
么没有
feel
体
very
检？
strange.
他们
How
说
come it was
是
just
关
for
心
2
我
of
们，
us,
就
but they
是
only
监狱
took
里
the
的
2 of us?
那种
They
警
say
察
because
说
they
是对
care
我们
about
关心
us.
给我们
The
体
police
检。
say they care
但是
about
我
us.
觉得很
They
奇
want to
怪，
do
因
a
为
health check,
我们身
but
体
I
很
feel very
好，
strange
不需
because we
要
were
体
very
检。有很
healthy.
多
We
很
didn't need
身
a
体很不
health
好
check.
的
There were
病人，
many
就是
other
犯人，并没有
prisoners,
被带去
criminals
体检
were not in good
然
health, but
后
they will not be
那
taken
个
to
起点的
health
地
check
方
at all.
是一个
And the place they did
是一辆车
health check
那个
was
车
a
是直接
van.
开到监
The
狱里
van
停在关
drove
押
to
我
the
们
prisoner
关押女
directly,
犯人的那个
parked
大楼的楼下。
near
一般
downstairs
情
of the
况下，就
building
是
of the
自
female
卫
prisoner.
那
Under
个
normal
犯人给犯人
circumstances,
看病不是这样子的，
the criminal, the
他是要
prisoner's
犯人觉
health
得
check
自
is
己
not
身体
like
不舒
that.
服，要先给就
So
是
the inmates needs
监
to
狱
actually
里的那种
report to
管理
the
犯人的犯人
officers
打
in
报告
charge
说我身体
first.
不好，我
They
要
need to
体检
report,
我要
saying that, you
要
know,
上医
I'm
务
not
所什么
feeling
之类
well,
的。
I need to go
但是
to
我们
the
这个都没有，我
infirmary.
们没有要求
But
过，然后被带去一个
we
车
didn't
上
make
体
any
检，
request,
那个
and
车
then we
上
were
的设备很
taken
先
to
进
the van.
然后
In the van,
他让
full
那
of
个
very
给我们
advanced
检查的人
equipment.
让我们站在那个
And the
仪器
person who
前
did our
检查我们
health
的内
check
脏，
asked us to stand
还
in
有
front
抽
of the
血。然
equipment,
后
check
我
our
当时
organs,
不
took
是
our
很
blood.
清楚为什么要
At
做
that
这些
time, I
检
was
查，
not
就
very
我们
clear
两个
why
人，就
we
其
went
他
through
我
this
就
health
我
check. Only
大
the
概
two
情
of
况就是
us.
这样。我只是很奇怪，当时因为我不知
I
道
just feel
具
very
体，
strange at that time. That's just about the rough situation back then.
基本上就是这个样子。
That's the basic situation.
Ms. Lee, were you ever threatened that if you do not renounce your faith, you will be taken to Xinjiang province?
请问一下，你当时是不是有被威胁？如果你不转化或者是放弃你的信仰的话，你会被带到新疆省？
对，当时
Yes.
有一个犯人，他专
And
门
what did
负
you
责看管我的，因为当时我被一个很小的房
At
间
that
里，像
time,
紧闭间，就
there
是
was one
他们把我单独
inmate
关押，然后有4个犯人
told me
日夜看护着我，我的一
at
言
that
行
time
都
I
是被
was
记录
put
的。
into
那个领头的那个犯人
a
经常
separate
这样威胁
isolation
我，他说
cell.
如果你不
The
转化，您就可
that
能被
prisoner
送到新疆，
constantly
或者
threatened
是
me,
送到
say
反
that
正
if
就
you
是大
don't
西北那
transform,
边。
we will be
因为
sent to
就
the
是说，要你永远
northwestern
都无法回
area
来
to，
然后
Xinjiang,
或者是给我
and
加
they
刑
will
之类的，就
they
说
will
这些
make you
话。
there. You will never be able to return. And they will add time
然
to
后
my
这些犯人的
sentence.
话，一般都是被
in
队长
Xinjiang
授意过的，他们也不敢随便乱讲话的，因为他们互相也是互相
So
监
these
督的。
inmates,
如果他们就是说，
they are not
他
to
们之
talk
间
freely
如
among
果
each
要
other
做了
because
什么
they
事情，也
also
是被
monitor
警察要
themselves,
管的，但是他们
monitor
会
each
对法
other
轮学
within
工学员会
themselves.
做得更过分，就是这样。
But they treated Falun Gong practitioner even worse.
Oh, 我还记得那个犯
And
人
I
的名
also
字叫曹
recall
景，
the inmate's name is
他
Cao Jing.
他是被法判刑无期徒刑的，他是无期徒刑，所以他对法
He
轮功
was
特别
put
狠。
in life sentence. He was very evil to Falun Gong practitioners.
Thank you. Ms. Lee, can you explain briefly to the tribunal how you were tortured while you were in detention?
你可不可以跟法庭解释一下，当时你是怎么样受酷刑的？什么样的酷刑？
我当时是被关在一个大概只有2平米的房间里，然后那个日夜都是4个人看着我，然后不让我上厕所，只允许我用一个痰盂。这是其中一种羞辱吧，是一种人格的羞辱。而且那几个犯人天天骂我。他们说你因为你不转化，我们要给你到死到尿的，就是用这种话来骂我。然后就是如果我不按照他们说的去操那些行为规范，就不让我睡觉。然后我如果在他每天让我写思想报告，如果我说出我真心的想话，他们就说要给我加刑。然后让我天天看诽谤法轮功的那些视频，还有让他们阅读诽谤法轮功的书籍。如果我不听，他们就会以加刑威胁，然后不让我洗澡。
they would extend sentence. Otherwise, they don't allow me to wash to take shower. They didn't allow families to see me or buy anything.
天天让我坐在一个凳子上，就是不
Put me
准
on
动。那
to
个
a
坐
very
的两
small
个屁
stool,
股
sitting
都
there,
都
cannot
磨
move.
出很厚很厚的茧子，然后，
So I got blisters on my butt
让
after
我
a
再
long
想想。
time sitting there.
然后就是这
Let me think
些
about it.
身体上的承受还算好，就是精神压力太大了。
So these
每天
physical
就是
torture
很
was
紧
not as
张，然
bad
后
as those
每
mental
天都
torture.
是
Every
心脏就是紧
day
绷的那种
it
状
was
态，
very
然后
stressful.
我曾经
The
好几个月
heart
，4到5个月不
mentally
来例
is
假，
under
就
such
是
a
月经不来，
high
然后他
pressure.
们就强迫我
And I
吃那个
missed
避
my
孕药。
periods for several
后
months. They forced me to take
然后，如果我稍微做的
pills.
就是不符合他们要求，他们就是
If
骂
I
我，
don't
就是
follow
污蔑我，
their
然后还污蔑我的家人，污
policy,
蔑我的
if
师傅，就
if
这
I
样。
don't follow their commands strictly, they will slander my master, slander me.
然后我觉得身体上的痛苦，我觉得都是比较容易承受的。
And I just feel that all this pain in my body I could bear, but the mental abuse was just so great.
我那时候都感觉呀，都快承受不住了。如果不是因
I
为我
feel
有
that I
信仰，我真的
couldn't
是无法
bear
承受得了。
anymore at that time. Had I not had the belief, I couldn't bear. I didn't think I could bear if I didn't have my belief.
我就能回忆起这些，可能有许多细节我想不起来了。
I can recall these rough
就太紧
situations.
张。
There might be some detailed situation that I cannot recall. I'm too nervous.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. The tribunal may have some questions for you.
谢谢。特别法庭会问你一些问题。
Ms. Lee, thank you very much for coming before the tribunal. I have just a few questions for you, more for clarification.
Yes.
Firstly, you have already said that you were asked why you were being examined medically, and the response given was that the prison authorities care about you. Were there any other explanations given to you?
对。
你那时候有没有收到其他的解释？
没有。
No, there were no other explanations.
You also state that in the women's prison there was an infirmary for minor sicknesses, and then if there was more severe illness, they would go to Tilanqiao prison. My question is, were you or did any of the other Falun Gong practitioners, were they ever sent to any of these other?
你刚刚说的那句我没有听清楚。
Sorry, let me repeat that question. Were you or any other Falun Gong
后面的我
practitioners?
没有听清楚。
She can't hear us.
就是说你刚才说到，在女子监狱所那边有一个
hello?
医务室。Just 1 second.
我听不到了。
现在可以听到吗？
现在可以。
你刚才说在女子监狱所有一个医务室是专门是治疗一些比较小病，那么如果说有囚犯如果有严重的病的话呢，会送到提篮桥那边去，提篮桥医院去。那么请问一下，你或者是其他法轮功学员有没有曾经被送到这个提篮桥的医院去？
我有被送过。
I was sent there. I was sent to.
我有被送过提篮
I was
桥监狱。
sent there before. I was sent to a Tilanqiao prison before.
Okay, why were you sent there?
为什么你被送到那儿？
我忘记了，因为我曾经去过2次，但是具体详细的忘记，因为时间太久了，我只记得有2
Because
次。
it was a long time ago, and I forgot the specifics.
Okay.
I can only remember there were twice.
Okay. moving on, when you were in the prison, were you ever told about organ harvesting? Did anybody ever?
我听不到了。
你在监狱的时候，有没有人曾经跟你提到过或跟你说到有关于器官摘除的事情，强摘器官的事情？
没有，没有。
No.
And no one threatened you with.
但是但是我现在想起来，但是那几个就是叫曹静的那几个看管我的人，他们有时候会很神秘的讲一些东西。就是比方说，当他们威胁我送到大西北的时候，我觉得他们话里边是有内涵的，但是他们没有明说，我也没有去问，因为当时在那里也很紧张，很害怕。
China, they seems to be implying something else, but I didn't understand what they meant because I was very scared and I was very nervous at that time when I was there.
你能听到我说话吗？
Okay. My next question. You mentioned that the other inmates were punished because you refused to give up practicing Falun Gong. Were the other inmates that were also punished, were they Falun Gong practitioners?
Sorry, can you ask your question again?
Miss Lee in her statement says that she was asked or she was ordered to stop practicing, but she didn't stop practicing, so the other inmates were punished because she refused. I want to know the identity of the other inmates. Were they Falun Gong practitioners or were they just ordinary criminals?
一般的囚犯有偷盗窃，还有吸毒。
Ordinary prisoners, including scammers, drug users, etc.
Okay. In her time in detention, Ms. Lee, did you see any other group of prisoners receiving the special medical attention that you received?
同样的这种健康检查吗？像你做的这种检查？
因为和我一起去的就是那个叫王依依的，因为王依依她在明户网上也有讲到过这件事情。后来我在明户网也有查到，有好几个关押在女子监狱的。就是法轮功学员都遇到过这种情况。其他的人，因为他们不让我和其他法轮功学员说话，我也不知道他们的情况，因为他们时刻看着我，不让我接触任何其他的法轮功学员。除非那种转化的，我可以接触，但是必须有第三人在场。就是没有转化的，是绝对不让我接触的。
Then I can talk to them, but if the practitioners who are not transformed, they strictly forbid me to talk to them.
But you didn't see any other group of other prisoners receiving special medical attention?
你是不是没有看到其他的囚犯，就是一般的囚犯，有受过像这样的健康检查呢？
没有，我没有看到过。
No, I never seen that.
Can you also let the tribunal know when you underwent all these medical examinations? Was this part of the process, like when you are brought into the prison, you must undergo medical examination, or was this totally different from normal admission?
你在关押期间所做的这个健康检查，你可不可以告诉特别法庭，就是这个是不是一般正常的程序？
就是一般入狱大家都通过的这个程序，或者是特别这个例外的一种做法。
是特别例外都没有。
This is a special case for Falun Gong practitioners. Other inmates never receive this kind of health checks.
因为当时带我去的那个犯人说，
other regular prisoners didn't receive this, because that particular prisoner told me that, well, they treat you so well, better than us. We never received something like this.
Did you ever ask yourself, while you were in detention, if on the one hand the prison authorities say that they care for you, why is it that they treated you so badly?
在监狱里面的时候，你有没有想过，就是他们一方面说他们关心你，但是呢，却又被受到这样的待遇？
因为当时不知道活在这件事情。 只是觉得很
Because at
奇
that
怪，
time I
因
didn't
为
know
我不觉得
about
他们是
organ
关心我，
harvesting.
但是
I
我也
only
说不
felt
上
very
什么
strange. I
什么
didn't
理由
feel that
来，
they care
我
about
只
me.
能就觉得有一个疑
I
问
can't
而
really say
已。
what the
就
reason
是
is. I
等我
just
出
had
来之
that
后，我才知道活
doubt,
在这件事情，我才
suspicion in my
才
mind.
明白那
After
次
I
期
was
间可能
released,
意味
I
着什么。
realized there was organ harvesting, and all of a sudden I realized what that could imply.
And did you in your time in the prison, did you ever go through a hunger strike? Did you ever do a hunger strike?
你有没有绝食过？
我没有觉，
No, I didn't do
但
a
是有
hunger
几次就是
strike.
都没有活下去的那种
Thank you
勇气
very
的。
much for
但
patiently.
是我知道师傅告诉我不能自杀，所以我一直就
I
就
didn't
这
have,
样。
but there were several times I didn't have the courage to live longer, but because my master told me we cannot commit suicide, so I hang on. 谢谢。
Thank you very much for your fortitude and your
Madam,
patience.
if you could just first of all, thank you for helping us so far.
非常谢谢你帮
I
助
think
我
there may be one more question, but only if you feel able to answer it.
我们现在有一个，我们现在有可能最后一个问题，不知道你是不是可以回答，是不是觉得可以回答？
I make question?
Yes.
Continue? Okay. On
Yes. Yes.
page 352, you say,
352
I was under tremendous mental pressure, which caused my period to stop
你说精神
for 3 to 4 months.
所以3、4个月
They forced me to take contraceptive medicine. Why did they force you to take contraceptive medicine?
经常是
你吃避孕药。
他说是以免我以后不能生小孩。我当时因为我也不太明白，所以他们
你说以免
说
你，对不起，
但是我想我还是以后还是想要小孩，所以我就吃了。
你说他们，
我也不知道是对还是错。
你再说一次。
他当时说是，如果我不吃这个避孕药，我以后就不能生小孩。
They say that if I don't take this pill, I won't be able to pregnant, but I still want to get pregnant in the future, so I took it.
But I believe that is false.
我不相信这是正确，这是
That is
错误
false about the medicine, is it not, Doctor?
他们所说，
I'm not in a position.
他是这样
Okay.
告诉我的。
说的是错的，我相信。That's what they told me.
Again, for making yourself available to give evidence. We fully appreciate the fortitude of various kinds necessary for you to get to this position, but you have provided the tribunal with great
非常
assistance.
感谢
Thank you.
您这么坚强地告诉我们这些证词，这对于我们的特别法庭有非常大的帮助。
也谢谢你们为我们尽快能帮助我们解体中共对法轮功学院的迫害，谢谢你们。
To stop this persecution of Falun Gong by the Communist Party. Thank you.
Mr. Sabi?
Thank you.
We're in good time for lunch, but a few minutes early, but Would you like us to sit again as originally planned at?
Yes, please, because our witness is in New York, and that would be the time that we can get her.
So that's 2:45.
Yes, please.
I had heard of another possible witness who might fill the gap, but no longer possible.
We haven't had the confirmation yet.
If the confirmation comes, that will be at 2:15?
The other witness is also in New York, so they're waiting for the right time to give her a call.
I'm asked whether it would be possible to move the last witness who I've seen in the room today to the 2:15 slot, but I see Ms. Nice not agreeing or shaking her head.
Mr. Robertson evidence, which is slotted for 4:30, is of importance to the tribunal, and you may want to ask him a number of questions,
yes,
and that would then interrupt our program. So if the tribunal is happy, we'll reconvene at 2:45.
Yes, we will convene at 2:45, but we will in fact be available at 2:15 should the other witness confirm willingness to attend. As to the public, 2:45, and if you come back and we've already started, so be it. If you want to wait around for the possibility of 2:15, do, but it looks like 2:45. Thank you.